Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the mornings. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, October 27th, 2022. Time for another show. Yes, we're doing another one. It's only Thursday. Now, my Tuesday having felt like a Monday, I now somehow am landing on a Thursday that feels like a Friday. But I think all Thursdays just generally feel like that. It's all right. We have plenty to go on here. And, of course, Greg Dworkin already preparing the Punt-O stories in today's Skype roundup. So, plenty to go over there. No new Prime Minister for the UK today. It's just the same one that they had yesterday. So, that exciting news cycle, I think, is pretty much over with. So, you know, good, great, fantastic, fine. We'll settle on one guy for a little while, learn a little something about him. He'll meet with the new king. They got too much new stuff going on there in Great Britain. It's an old country. They got to get some old stuff to go on. No more of this new crap. And then we'll be able to look at them with fresh eyes, I guess. All right, today is also, I don't know. Apparently, I don't know what the actual deadline or date is here, but last night, as I was trying to get a handle on things, as the day was winding down, I noticed that most of Twitter, at least in my Twitter feed, was essentially writing their goodbyes to Twitter. I guess the Elon Musk purchase of Twitter is supposedly set to go through. I guess anything can happen with Elon Musk, and it might all collapse. I think it's being reviewed for some national security implications, which it should be, because Twitter is now capable of electing game show hosts as president. So, there's some real issues there. I don't know whether they'll step in and prevent it. It's probably not the sort of thing that they would want to do, right now or really ever, close to an election, even far away from an election, because, of course, he'll begin complaining that the government is targeting him, and who knows, then we'll end up with him as president, and that's all we need. Anyway, people were talking as if they were on their way out the door, and somebody started a very popular thread of post your favorite tweets from the many years we've spent here, and then kiss them goodbye, we're out of here. People making plans to move to other platforms, except nobody has settled on one in particular, so who knows what comes up next. I don't know. I mean, we've been through it before in the sense that these platforms come and go, and we find one another and gather. But it'll be sad to see if Twitter actually collapses. We have a nice community of people here, and I've met some people that I never knew before via Twitter. I mean, it happened in blogs too, so whatever the next platform is, I'm sure it'll happen again. But I'm not exactly ready to let go of everything. And I'm not entirely convinced that the whole thing collapses so precipitously, but I guess eventually it does. I don't know. Anyway, whenever anybody settles on some fun place for everybody to move to, let me know, and I guess we'll move over there. And I guess it's also time to start snapping up your username on these other platforms as well. Probably one of the best squatting scams out there would be to snap those up in other people's names and force them to buy them from you later on, probably in cryptocurrency. All right, let's see. Many other things happening today. Oh, Greg Dworkin is one of them. So why don't we just get started by pressing the green button and enabling our show to go forward. Greg, already set to go? Good morning. How are you doing?
No?
All right. I'll give you 15 minutes.
Right, and you're an old fart too.
Sure, me in
England. I know this
England.
because we talk on Twitter, but not on TikTok.
Right, that's true. I can't get used to that visual element of it. And there's another Twitter or a TikTok competitor that's advertising very heavily to me through my old person solitaire app on my phone. And I guess, what do they call it? Crap, I already forgot what it's called. But at any rate, it's another one of these, and I can't understand. Yeah, that's the one. GeoCities, I think it's called.
Right. You get there by Netscape Navigator.
Yeah, pretty much. I think that's right. I'll go to Ask Jeeves and find out. I don't know. Just the visual element of these things. What I don't understand is if video is the prime element of all this thing, how come, I guess, the kids today love their video screen cluttered up with all this other garbage? There's floating hearts and all sorts of things, and the kids don't have any lights in their houses.
What's the difference?
I don't know. I just nothing. I guess I just can no longer. Maybe my eyes are worse, and I can't find the main picture anymore with all these things flying around. But everyone seems to love that. I forget what this other one is called. Doesn't matter. It's probably owned by the Chinese and stealing all your data anyway.
Well,
So,
when you were young,
knows?
you had the desktop where your folders would grow feet and then walk off and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
right.
What's
I
the
mean,
difference,
none of it
really?
made any sense then either. I'm sure there were old people then saying, "I don't understand this dancing baby. Why is he
Right,
dancing?"
but TikTok is growing.
Yes,
And
I kind of wish I knew.
other
I
social
understood
media
it better.
come and go, and that's why I mentioned Netscape Navigator and MySpace and other things that just sort of don't exist anymore.
Yes, right. And that's not that I don't
Lotus
understand
123.
TikTok. It's
You
that
still using that?
I don't do it. No, but I did know some people who hung on to that for a really long time, and they were like, "Where can I get? I still need a." They were buying used, 3.5-inch floppy disk drives so they can continue to use their Lotus 123. Well past the time when no one was using fixed media anymore, anyway.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. So old stuff. I understand the TikTok. I just don't want to turn my camera on.
Right.
It's for young people who look good on camera.
Well, my current monitor actually doesn't even have a camera, so
Oh, right. Well, that's not. even
I
a
gave
thing.
the one with a camera to my son because he's young and I'm not.
Right, and that's you use it for those purposes. So it's it's a phone thing anyway. So I don't know, and what I can't figure out is the line. Here's where I don't understand: is the line between that's stupid and mundane and no one wants to hear about it, and that's stupid and mundane, but a million people want to hear about it. That's what I can't figure out the
Well,
difference.
and also that's stupid and mundane and nobody wants to see it.
Right. I mean, I think I'm producing all of that content. And other people are like, no, this is what I ate today. French fries. Wow. Whoa. All right. I don't understand it. They're Korean. Maybe that's it. I don't get
I
it.
was right. You are old.
I don't understand. That's really it. That's when I've
Get
broken
my
off
lawn.
from. Yeah.
So let's go back
Sorry,
to the news here. We got
TikTokers.
some news today. First of all, the U.S. economy returned to growth, says AP, in July through September, after two straight negative quarters, expanding at a 2.6% rate. 2.4 was figured.
Whoa.
So, no, we're not
What?
in recession.
All right.
Is this a sign for the feds to up everything,
Yeah, sure.
all the rates, and so we can go into recession the way they want? I don't know. But it's good news. It's good news for Democrats with the election coming up. Not that it makes that much difference, but, it's there. The other thing, perhaps it's
Some
even
people
more
haven't
important, is
voted.
gas prices are coming down.
Right.
3 weeks of sharp declines, the most common pump price down from 3.79 to 3.39. National average within pennies of the 2022 low. More states are now at $3.49 and lower.
Oh, all right. Good for
So
you.
that's of
Put
interest.
it on TikTok.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know.
But I think
Maybe that is boring.
there's a lot of follow-up on the Fetterman debate.
Okay.
And,
Yes, from him.
I think we pretty much got it right in terms of what we thought was going to happen. Oz
Yeah,
is talking about fracking, and Fetterman is talking about Oz.
All right.
And he's specifically talking about Oz's comments about abortion and making it into ads.
Right. Good.
Here's two
ad
interesting
stuff.
pieces. This one is from Charlotte Alter in Time magazine. The Pennsylvania
that?
Senate race and the vibes theory of politics.
She's trying to be relevant in Time Magazine. Vibes. There you go.
Right? If Fetterman is able to eke out a win in November despite the debate disaster and the political headwinds buffeting the Democrats, it'll be a validation of his central political insight. You might call it the vibes theory of politics. The people who decide elections, Fetterman thinks, don't obsessively follow the polls or listen to wonky podcasts. Hey, they may not even be on Twitter.
That's probably true.
They vote based on vibes. People assume everybody reads Ezra Klein, Fetterman told me earlier this year.
wait,
But for
no.
most voters, it's not like they have their position papers laid out. He's hoping they don't much care about debates either.
Probably. I don't know about this Ezra Klein idea, but okay.
Just
Never assumed that.
To give you an idea, it's not like
He's nice.
you can't find supportive material for that. For example, This is a piece that Maggie Astor wrote in the New York Times. And let's start with a really interesting statistic. New from me, she writes, Fetterman's debate appearance was exciting and validating for many people with disabilities because it's so rare for political candidates to be candid about disability. Much of the public response, however, was painful. And I'm going to highlight some of the reporting and some additional quotes and reporting that I wasn't able to include, she writes on Twitter, which, by the way, is why I'm not leaving. It's how I follow the reporters.
Yeah,
for starters,
they may leave.
An important stat to remember in this conversation, 1/4 of Americans have a disability.
Oh.
That's a lot of voters.
That is an interesting way of looking at it. I guess it's a very wide definition.
Right?
Good.
Many people try to hide their disabilities, though, because of stigma. So it's a big deal to have a Senate candidate get on a debate stage with a disability that's impossible to hide in that context and talk about it matter-of-factly. I'm excited anytime I see a qualified candidate with a disability running, but even more so when I see one who doesn't hide who they are, said Rebecca Cockley to the author of this piece. She also noted, and this part isn't in the article, that society is still very uncomfortable with the idea that disabled people are comfortable being publicly disabled.
Okay.
Right? If you go, ooh, if you see somebody in a wheelchair and the person in the wheelchair says, what's your problem, bud?
Yeah.
Why aren't you sitting down? That's on you, not them.
Right.
And so what do you do about
Fair
that?
enough.
Do you look away? That's fine. Do you change your vote? Not really that likely.
Yeah, I would doubt it. I mean, yeah, I guess it depends on, well, where you are in life yourself and well, I guess how I don't know. I guess what the disability is and how impactful it is. I've never seen anybody who's made it all the way to this point in an election display some sort of disability that would make me change my mind at this point.
Yeah, it reminds me
Like if
of
they can't
this abortion
campaign,
thing will blow over, said
you
the
can't
men
hear
on the
about 'em.
Republican side that
Right.
they asked.
Okay. All right.
So here's a quote. I remember in the previous administration how quickly Democratic pundits were also likely to point out the former president's gaffes or how the president walked or did various tasks. And I think both parties are extremely guilty of weaponizing disability as a disqualifier against candidates that they don't favor.
Yes.
Which is a sort of separate argument. Herschel Walker and Donald
Right.
Trump are extremely inarticulate. And what happens is that when you go, we talked about this yesterday, when you go ahead and write it up for the paper, you consciously or unconsciously put together themes and statements as if they were coherent at the time they made them,
Yes.
which they were not.
Right.
Right. So people are hesitant to make the case for diverse representation that's inclusive of people with disabilities. We saw it during Sotomayor's confirmation when she was attacked, and it was speculated she was unfit because she could randomly go into diabetic shock. We see it brought up with the current president's speech impediment. There's nothing new. But to me, it continues to demonstrate that disability is not seen as part of diversity in the broader political climate. Whether it is or whether it isn't. That's the broader media climate, not necessarily the political climate. How people report on politics is not the same thing as how they vote.
That's definitely true.
So the
different people in
representation
many
is
cases.
the part many disabled people found validating, but they found a lot of found a lot of commentary painful, especially implicit suggestions that if you have barriers to understanding oral communication, you can't make decisions.
Yeah, I don't. That's
right. That's
what's
akin to
happening
like,
here.
oh, you don't speak English. Let me say it louder.
Yeah, right. This person is dumb because they can't, answer the question in this format. But they have thoughts about this issue, and if you sit down with them in their format, you'll be surprised at the depth of their thought and the articulate way in which they can express it if you give them a second.
Right, and here's another one that's not in the article. It's really difficult to learn how to communicate in a new way, and he's communicating in a new way using a new tool in a nationally publicized debate. The stakes are so high there, and I was just like, wow, this is a lot. And in my experience, just personally, I've had moments on stage, multiple if I'm being honest, where I've fallen in front of elected officials, in front of my boss, and I've had these pangs of anxiety. Are people now going to see me as the human I really am, which is a very disabled one? And in the moment, I've just had to be like, it's okay. And so I totally related to that.
No, that's a nice moment.
right?
Hope
And
it works.
it's really good reporting, and I think it's important to do that. And I think a lot of the pushback at the time from people's discussion when they were watching it live
Yes.
is, recognizing the fact that when you see something that makes you uncomfortable, you cringe. That's what the reporters were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that may or may not be okay. It's human to cringe, but it's also important to go back and say, why did I do that? What's really bothering me about this?
Yes.
So that's a kind of, self-evaluation and self-insight that they generally skip over because that's for you other people. I'm going to just tell you what I see in a completely nonpartisan, non-biased way because I'm a reporter, as if I don't have feelings and I'm never, pushed by my own personal biases that I won't tell you about.
Yeah, I mean that's the key question right there. I cringed, and if you, I mean I didn't, but
So
if you did, right, you right. So you ask yourself, well, it's two different kinds of people. One person says, "Why did I do that?" And the other kind of person says, "Why did that person make me do that?" Or that person did it to me. I cringed because of what they did. They did something wrong, and and we'll stigmatize that versus.
You can look at it and say, this is really
upset
difficult.
about?
I appreciate how brave he is,
Yeah.
because this is all new for him and he's doing it anyway, matter-of-factly. And you can look at it and say, oh, that's really cringy. He's going to lose the election because of this.
Yeah. Well,
which is incredibly superficial. But then again, that probably means you weren't the Philadelphia Reporter, for example. This is Matthew Gertz from Media Matters, and he's got a really, really interesting thread about national media versus Pennsylvania media.
Okay.
Gives an example. New York Times. Fetterman showing stroke effects, battles Oz in hostile Senate debate. Subheading, Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, a Democrat, tried to assure voters of his fitness to serve. Mehmet Oz, a former celebrity physician and Republican, attacked him as too radical for the job.
Mm-hmm.
That's the New York Times. Fox 43, local affiliate. Oz and Fetterman spar at first and only U.S. Senate debate. The debate generally played out as expected. Fetterman stumbled over some words, and both candidates spent much of their time attacking each other.
Right.
Which is what happened.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right.
Right. So how the debate plays in Philly, halfway through an issues-focused segment, the ABC reporter says there were noticeable pauses and delays in Fetterman's responses. He reminded viewers he suffered a stroke just months ago. The station publishes the national AP story headline, Fetterman struggles in Senate debate against Oz after stroke, but the report mentions that viewers could hear the impact of the stroke but doesn't fixate on it. And he goes on to write, it's really remarkable how these local TV reporters are able to mention Fetterman's stroke, acknowledge that he stumbled, but then move on to other issues, and then gives a few more examples.
Okay.
Meanwhile, after the Pennsylvania Senate debate, broadcast morning news spent nearly as much time on Fetterman's health as on policy issues, which I found amazing because they spent time on policy issues.
That's pretty incredible.
Right? It was 50-50.
All right. It was only 11 seconds long in total, but okay.
Right. And that local affiliate was actually in York, Pennsylvania, not exactly Madison, Wisconsin, if you get my drift there.
Okay, yes. I think so.
So this is yourerie.com, E-R-I-E, Erie, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Fetterman Oz face-off in Senate debate, energy, crime, abortion among issues discussed.
That seems right.
I mean, it was really excellent local reporting. I'm just making the point that, don't believe everything you read on Twitter, especially from national correspondents.
Yeah, New York Times. Well, that's, interesting that there would be such a split. And I guess in Pennsylvania you feel a certain responsibility.
Who parachute into Pennsylvania and then pretend to be part of the local scene.
They went to a diner.
Yins have to be, aware of that.
I guess they are. Well, that's the phenomenon always, right? Parachuting in, go to a diner and say, I'm a local.
Local Pittsburgh slang for I'm really not from Pennsylvania, but I read about this on the internet.
That's what I see people say. All right.
So this was just for fun. This is yourerie.com.
Again.
Also had a poll.
All right.
One of these online non-scientific polls with 737 responses. Who do you think won the Pennsylvania Senate debate? Fetterman 58, Oz 42. Look, it's totally unscientific. The point I'm trying to make here is you can't step back and predict what's going to happen. Oz obviously had a better debate from the structure of it.
Okay.
And, he used it to his best effect on these 30, 60-second responses by speaking as quickly as possible, trying to get as much information in. He was good at that. He's good with cameras.
All right.
But he came across as Oz. And Fetterman clearly had the worst of it in the debate for mechanistic reasons. But he came across as Fetterman. So who won the debate? Well, whoever wins the election.
Okay, yeah, I guess.
Because, they were who they were.
To do with it, I guess so. Or there's always the possibility that once again, the other working theory that the debate means nothing. It's just an excuse for reporters to say that it had an impact, and the outcome of the election is and always was what it was going to be, whether there was a debate or not. But we don't know that.
Well,
we can't
that's
prove it.
likely true because, just about in all cases, debates don't really make a difference. There are some rare occasions where it does.
Yeah,
I think
maybe.
Richard Murdoch
Who
was
knows?
one of them.
I mean,
this one might be. You never know. But, you'd have to go back
you'd have to find
after the
exit
fact
polls
and look at exit polling or something else to say, no, this is why this happened.
People
or,
would have to say.
Or Oz picked up all the late deciders after the debate, something like that. Without that information.
I don't know, unless people say it. Like, I was going to vote for that guy, but then he said something in the debate and I changed my mind. It's hard for me to even believe him when they say it.
Yeah, right. I mean, I was going to vote for Fetterman, but Oz made fun of him, so I voted for Oz.
Yeah, I love the way people make fun of people. It's great. It really makes me happy.
But I think that just, frames properly what actually happened. It would be wrong to look at that Erie.com online poll, take it seriously, and say, obviously, Fetterman won the debate. Because, even more obviously, he didn't.
Okay.
In fact, it was not particularly good for either candidate, and that's one of the reasons why it may not make a difference in the long run.
Could be. I mean, it's very rare that there's such a killer moment in a debate.
Well, but there was a killer moment. Unfortunately, it was Oz's. Again, he's the one that said that abortion should be between a woman, a physician, and your local official.
Yes, well,
right?
that is as
and
close
Dan
to
Rather,
tweeted
this morning or last night. I had a doctor's appointment, so I took my local councilman with me. Thank goodness he was available.
Take the dog catcher.
That is being like $1 million. Actually, he raised $2 million after the debate that did, and he's putting that money into ads with that specific Oz clip in mind.
Yeah.
And just like we suggested yesterday, Fetterman was going to jump on that, and Oz is somewhat limited in terms of what parts of the debate he can really use in attack ad clips.
Yeah, that is true. And it was preemptively denied to him, too, as people, gave this backlash to the idea that you should be focusing on the disability. Now it will make him look like even more of a villain.
Well, it'll make him look more like us. I mean, that's the whole point. You are really seeing who they are, like it or don't like it. Fetterman is not polished. He's never going to be polished. That's not his charm, if he has any.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah.
Well, if you ask him, that's not
right. Yeah. Well, he's
charm.
not. He's not a refined individual, but it has a charm of its own. I guess it wouldn't be a traditional type of charm per se, but okay.
I'm just a real person, that's all, with real issues. And when I get knocked down, I get up and just like you do, and vote for me.
All right.
I like it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad. You should move to Pennsylvania and register real quick.
All right. I'm going to mention Simon Rosenberg and Target Early here. Simon, of course, is our ultimate optimist for Democratic chances.
All right.
Simon says, using newly updated Target Early data, at this point in 2018, 300,000 more Republicans had voted than Democrats. Today, Democrats have a 1.8 million vote lead and are performing particularly well in Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. And we'll go over those after the break.
Right.
Heads down all, keep working hard. We can do this.
All right, then.
This is all true. In other words, what you cannot do is look at early voting and figure out who's going to win. Because although you know who's voting, what you do not know is who has yet to vote.
Yes.
And how they voted.
Okay.
But without those
that's
two
the second
crucial
one
pieces of information, you really don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah. Although it's funny, the pundits love to get on TV and talk about if not who hasn't voted, then which areas haven't had their votes counted yet, and love to predict based on that. But here you can't even do that.
And we'll see that in
you don't
Nevada
know any
because
geographic
the rurals
tags.
are not turning out strong, but you don't know whether they're going to show up on E-Day.
Right. There could be a cow in the road.
What if they continue not to show up? What if they do show up? Completely different scenarios. So which one is it going to be? Well, we don't know. Well, why are you talking about it then? Because I got airtime to fill.
Right. Maybe the wind doesn't blow and the windmill doesn't recharge their Tesla and they can't make it to town.
The wind was blowing pretty hard the first couple of days, so turnout was pretty low. But it turned out even after the wind died down, turnout was still pretty low.
Yeah.
In Nevada.
As
not
it
true
turns
in
out,
Georgia, not true in other places. So
there's always electricity anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's one of the favorite excuses. I love that Trump and others continue to do that one. What if the wind doesn't blow? That's why you can't have windmills. Yeah, sometimes the wind blows and they're not using
what
electricity.
If the sun doesn't come up? That's why you can't have solar.
Right, yeah, exactly. Every time I turn on my flashlight, I wonder, the little windmill it's attached to, will it work? No, it's actually... We use batteries, and guess what? There's this new thing where you can store electricity.
Why can't we just run a cord directly from the sun? And don't worry, we'll go at night when it's cooler to install it.
Yeah, perfect. So, yeah, I don't know why that came to mind. Just one of the general forms of idiocy that he displays. Unless someone's going to try to convince me that's a disability, then I can stop talking about it.
Right. When we get back, we're going to talk about 7 rules for surviving the media's election mania from Walter Shapiro, a guy who's been around, under the title Overhyped.
Oh, okay. And in all that time, only 7 he could come up with, eh?
Well, there's an 8th.
Oh, all right. But he's just still trying that one out. And in 20
the
years,
just don't watch cable TV this week.
Okay. Yeah, that's always good advice. All right, we'll be back in 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. 2 minutes are up. Ready for genius? Let's go. What were we going to do next? I forget.
You're talking to me?
We put something aside as too long to fit in the 30 seconds we had, and now
Walter Shapiro.
Walter Shapiro, that's
who's
right.
covered, I can't remember whether it's 11, 16, or 137 different presidential races, but he's been around for a while. Has this really nice piece in the New Republic, TNR.
Okay.
7 rules for surviving the media's election mania. If that surprising poll seems too good to be true, it probably is. I came across that after tweeting this morning. I'm looking at these Democratic polls showing Democrats with 11-point leads in places that are tied.
Okay.
So, there's so much garbage polling out there. You really just have to.
But that's a fun one. Okay.
So, once again, he writes, the Democrats are staring into the electoral abyss. The renewed optimism of early September now seems as ancient as the Punic Wars. Every new GOP-leaning poll and forecast brings back memories of 2010 and 2016. At this rate, Prozac is fast becoming the official drug of the Democratic Party. And for the truth that you are unlikely to hear on cable TV, nobody knows with certainty what's going to happen, especially with a closely knotted Senate. As veteran forecaster Charlie Cook wrote last week, why so many people offer such confident predictions about the Senate continues to baffle me. I like Charlie. Charlie's honest.
Baffle. Yeah. By the way, I think Prozac may be a dated reference, too.
In an interview, Democratic political consultant Tim Hogan colorfully described this current period of intense nervous speculation about the election as hot take Christmas.
Okay.
With 2 weeks until the election, here's 7 sensible
Weird.
rules designed to help you preserve your mental health until November 8th.
Hot
Afterwards you can
take
lose it, but you got to,
Christmas.
try to hold on until then.
All right.
Right? Polling is in deep crisis for many reasons, including an alarmingly low level of response, increased difficulties in modeling the electorate, and massive distrust of the media. As a result, all polls, even those with glittering brand names, should be regarded as closer to a blunderbuss than a sharpshooter's rifle.
Whoa.
Curb your enthusiasm as well as your distress. That can refer to Ann Selzer finding Chuck Grassley in an unexpectedly tight race, but it also applies to all the Democrats still hiding under the bed after reading last week's New York Times Siena poll that showed a sudden, sharp move to the Republicans. Remember, polling may be broken in ways that we will only understand after the election.
Okay.
Political mavens have grown increasingly sophisticated about how they consume polls. Over the past decade, we've witnessed the rise of survey averages, such as the ones at Real Clear Politics, and intricate polling models, such as the one pioneered at 538. Polling averages and models remain a better snapshot than any one survey, but this could be a year when all those corrective efforts collapse under the weight of flaws in the polling itself. As Jen Ritter, who was swing state director for Joe Biden in 2020, said in an interview, the data isn't telling us enough anymore. It's too scattered. It's too confusing.
Oh.
Right?
Well,
so
now what? Okay.
Look at the polling, keep the polling in mind, but don't live and die by the polling.
All right. Really don't die at all.
We've only had 2 polls of my district, Connecticut 5. One last month showed that Johanna Hayes, the Democrat and incumbent, ahead by 2 points. And a new different one from Emerson today shows George Logan, the Republican, ahead by 1 point. Now, on the one hand, that's the same result,
Okay.
this thing called margin of error.
Right.
And on the other hand, they both could be wrong. And how do
in
we know?
different
We don't.
ways.
We'll find out in 2 weeks.
I guess so. All right.
At the same time, the same pollsters, and in some cases different pollsters, but the same pollsters in a lot of cases are finding that both Richard Blumenthal and the governor, Ned Lamont, Democrats, have 13-point leads or so, plus or minus a point, over their Republican counterparts. So what does that all mean? I mean, with people understanding that the Republican Party in Connecticut is pretty extreme, why would Connecticut 5 run so much differently? First of all, it's year over year. There's sometimes it's the other side of the state where Joe Courtney lives, where the submarine base is. Sometimes that's the closest, but often Connecticut 5 is. And we've shifted between Democrats and Republicans being our representative in my short tenure in Connecticut since 1989. But George Logan is not a radical. He's a Glenn Youngkin style, smiley face moderate in terms of his projection.
If that's what Glenn Youngkin is, but that's the mask.
No, that's
he
in terms
wants.
of his projection.
Yes. Okay. Underneath.
Underneath a different story,
right.
Although Logan's probably more of a moderate than Youngkin is.
That may be true. The redder the vest.
It's very hard to run against him as he's too radical for Connecticut.
Okay.
Because he's really, he comes across as being a nice guy. So I would expect this to be a close race. What I would like to see Democrats do more, and they haven't done so yet, is say, the problem with any Republican is they're going to vote for Kevin McCarthy.
Yes.
And Kevin McCarthy
really
is a complete Russian tool nut job.
Wow.
With no spine and who's a liar. So if you want Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker of the House, vote for this guy. But I'm saying you shouldn't.
Yeah.
You're better off with Democrats, and I would like to see some variation of that, and I haven't.
Oh.
Because otherwise it's hard to, it's not that George Logan, the opponent, is so radical. It's that his party is, and they do not deserve your vote.
Yeah. What are they saying instead? Is so radical?
Abortion matters,
Well,
and George Logan is simply too radical for Connecticut.
I see. All right. Well, yeah, they could do
good
better.
ads.
They could say, abortion is in trouble, and George Logan, right. Well, it doesn't matter what George Logan is like. He's going to get there, and they're going to force him to be a Republican, and then your abortion rights go away, regardless of how nice a guy George Logan is.
Right.
But that's a long commercial.
Anyway, so back to our 7 rules here, plus
Oh.
the 8th, which is not watch cable.
Right. All right.
Number 3, recognize that it's too late for the Democrats and Republicans to change strategies. At this point, every Democrat should put the title strategist on their resume, said Tim Hogan, who's communications director for Amy Klobuchar. No matter where you turn, somebody's brandishing a new theory about how the Democrats could still savage the off year if only they did X.
Right.
With early voting underway in many states and Joe Biden less than a portrait of charisma, it's difficult to envision how a new Democratic message, if it existed, could possibly break through now. So, it is what it is. Refrain from reading much into early voting statistics. In North Carolina, a perennial swing state with a tight Senate race this year, 135,400 people cast early ballots last Thursday. Statistics like this would seem to offer early insight, but in truth, interpreting early voting is about as difficult as solving Fermat's last theorem in your head while using half-remembered high school algebra. The problem with the avalanche of data is that most states have repeatedly changed their rules on early voting, making year-to-year comparison virtually impossible. Also, parties have either encouraged early voting or developed conspiracy theories about it. Election analyst Sean Trendy perceptively noted in 2020 a truth about early voting and still holds. We don't have a lengthy history of good research giving our brains guidance for how to interpret early returns, so it's very easy to see what you want to see.
Okay. Maybe.
Okay. Here's another one. Realize you
Me.
are not the target audience for most political ads.
Aha. So.
Well, that's because most of them are on TikTok.
Oh.
If you're reading the New Republic, you probably are not a swing voter.
Yeah.
But too many Democratic voters and contributors look at TV spots through the narrow prism of how they emotionally react to the ad. True, many Democratic campaign ads are cookie-cutter products with all the pizzazz of an off-brand competitor to Pillsbury. But political science research suggests that the volume of campaign ads may matter more than the actual content. And forget about the so-called killer ad. In truth, you're more likely to encounter a great white whale on the campaign trail than find a single TV spot that'll transform a campaign.
Yes, I find that to be true, certainly, whenever somebody advertises one to me.
So if you just hear the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, what you're hearing from the Republicans, Johanna Hayes just doesn't get it. Inflation is here, and she's the reason.
Uh-huh.
Okay, will that work? I don't know. The ads against Dick Blumenthal are, Dick Blumenthal doesn't get it. Fentanyl is in our schools, and he's trying to kill people.
Yeah. That's odd.
That simply doesn't work.
Okay.
Okay. And the one about Ned Lamont is, Ned Lamont lies about your taxes. He's lied about taxes. It's about taxes. He's lying about taxes. Taxes. Lamont is a 13-point lead.
Okay. And
He's
also
pretty
lying.
popular governor.
All right.
That doesn't work. But
Well,
hitting
what else
Johanna
are you gonna
Hayes,
do?
who isn't that well known on inflation, that one works.
Yeah.
They're
quote
not doing
unquote
crime.
works. No?
They're doing inflation.
Okay. Because things are going pretty well.
They're
in
doing
Connecticut,
crime
I
with
guess.
Blumenthal for reasons which I don't totally understand.
They don't know what else to do. The guy's got a
it's
13
like Dick
point
Blumenthal is a senator, who's been working on gun safety. And why are you doing fentanyl and Dick Blumenthal? What's Dick Blumenthal got to do with fentanyl?
lead. Yeah. Oh,
What
who
kind of
knows?
point are you trying to make? He's
He's
personally
giving it away for
responsible.
Halloween.
How?
The Halloween thing. And he's putting it in the cookies.
Right. Here's
I don't know.
another
There are people
rule.
who swear that that's true.
Rule out panicking over Republican super PAC spending. CNN reported last week that the Senate Leadership Fund has spent $365 million in 10 Senate races since the beginning of September. It's hard to overstate the effects the super PAC has single-handedly made on advertising, the article gushed. The story reflected an all-too-common mistake, never mentioning that under the law, candidates pay dramatically lower TV ad rates than super PACs. In a major media market in October, that could mean a stunning 7-to-1 difference in ad rates. Shane Goldmacher reported in the New York Times that during the October 2 Las Vegas Raiders football game, Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masto paid $21,000 for a 30-second ad, and an anti-Masto Republican super PAC paid $150,000 for the same 30 seconds.
Fiscally responsible.
Remember, it's the number of gross rating points on television that Democrats and Republicans buy that matters, not the cash total. None of these recommendations will save you from bitter disappointment if 22 turns out to be a wipeout year for Democrats, but right now there's no sure way of predicting the election, even if you have a direct pipeline into the Delphic whirlpool. With historically slow counts in California, New York, and Pennsylvania, we don't even know right now when we will know who won. So brace yourself. It's going to be a long November. So I think all of that is pretty good advice.
Yeah, that's a good point. Certainly, the last one. difficult to digest very quickly. I don't know how easy these rules are, but okay, if you're into the reading,
Look, but don't believe
points.
everything you hear.
Or
and the
read.
people who are
What
telling
about
you
that?
they know what's going to happen really don't know what's going to happen. Charlie Cook is absolutely right.
That's probably true. And although I guess the best prediction was the one about people are going to come up with all sorts of new gimmicky ways of explaining or making their
If
predictions.
they only listen
I like
to me
that
in the
one.
last 3 days, it'll
Right.
make all the difference in the world.
Right, for the cotton candy pitchfork moms or something. I don't know. They got to come up with some kind of name for them, and I've identified they vote totally differently from everybody else.
Right.
Sure.
So here's a great example of what he was talking about with the early vote. This is from Georgia Public Broadcasting, PBS, NPR.
GPS. B.
GPB, Georgia
Yeah.
Public Broadcasting.
Okay.
PBS, Public
PS.
Broadcasting System. NPR, nice polite Republican. So we have Georgia's early voting turnout so far is blacker, older than recent general elections.
All right.
What does that mean?
Uh,
Nobody knows.
Yeah. Good picnic lunches to be had online.
Georgia does not have party registration, but voter data from the 2022
Grandparents.
spring primary shows that around 34% of early voters so far participated in the Republican primary and 32% in the Democratic primary, and the rest didn't vote in that election. So a third. It's unwise to read too much into those numbers. Some Democrats crossed over to vote against candidates backed by Trump in that primary, while the Democratic Party didn't have as many high-profile matchups. And, of course, people change their mind about who they support, and just knowing your party doesn't mean you know how they voted.
Yeah.
Right? Many of Georgia's early voters are reliable voters, with 95% of them participating in 2018, 2020, or 2021. 37,000 voters did not cast. That's out of I'm just giving 5 million voters. Did not cast ballots in any of these elections. Almost a third of them black voters. 40% of the 37,000 newly registered in 2022. Most of the ballots cast so far have been from in-person voting, which is typically how most Georgians cast. Georgia in particular, it's worthwhile following early voting because that's where most of the votes are going to be.
Huh.
Even so, nearly 250,000 Georgians have requested a mail-in absentee ballot, way down compared to 2020. Georgia has some of the most expansive early voting access in the country, spanning 3 weeks and including 2 mandatory Saturdays, for its 7.8 million registered voters ending November 4th. And so, again, it's worth looking at, and a couple of things can be said by looking at the sites that look at this. Here's Georgia Votes, and that's run by Ryan Anderson, and it's just, collecting all of the information. Atlanta Journal-Constitution does the same thing. So currently, the black vote is 30.8% of those who have cast their ballot. I think 26% by registration, so that's higher than the registered number, so that's good. And, in terms of how that compares to other years, again, there's different rules in different years, so it's always hard to know what that means. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution maintains a voting sites with lots of interesting charts and graphs on it, which basically is looking at the same information. And you can look and see which particular county has voted heavily and which haven't. Some of the heavily voting counties are the rural white counties, but there's pretty good votes coming out of Atlanta, which is how Democrats win in Georgia.
All right.
Okay, so that's all, all very interesting. In 2018, up to this point, 730,799 people have voted, 731,000 roughly. In 2020, which was a presidential year, 1.3 million.
Oh.
1,326,000 people had voted. And up until now, in a non-presidential year, 1,137,000 people have voted in person. So the in-person voting is very comparable to a presidential year. It's way up compared to 2018. The difference is that the presidential year was way, way more votes. In 2022, this year, there's been 118,000 mail ballots. In 2020, there were 800,000 mail ballots.
Wow. Well,
So that there is the difference between the two elections.
that there is it.
That there is it.
Okay. Well, there was a pandemic. There still is.
Females are voting much more than males.
Well, just once each.
Right. So older, blacker, more female. What does that mean? Probably good for Democrats, but who knows? And so that's a great example of what you can and can't learn from this sort of thing. There's a group, Target Smart, that does modeled voting, and they have a site called Target Early. And what they're doing is they're modeling the vote to see how it looks in their model, and it is a model. Okay. The Democrats in 2018 had 43% of the early vote up to this point, and right now they have 50.
Good.
That's good. The Republicans had 52,
right.
and right now they have 41. So those are encouraging numbers. Again, the problem with trying to analyze early vote, you can look at this and say, well, on balance, with many more people voting, and with a big chunk of the vote going to be from early vote, it looks like the Democrats are holding their own, if not doing better. And that's good news for Warnock. But you don't know how many people are going to show up on Election Day.
Right.
In Georgia, the bulk of the vote is early vote. So Republicans would have to show up on Election Day in vast, huge numbers in order to overcome the lead Democrats are going to build in the early vote. Can they? Yes, they can. That's why you can't tell.
Not if
But what
there are
you
cows
can
on the
say
road.
is you can look at this and say, well, if you have a red wave in Georgia, what that means is that Democrats are unenthusiastic and they don't build this firewall. You got to think about it, early voting in Georgia the way you think about Clark County and Washoe and Nevada. You build your firewall and then you wait for the onslaught. If your firewall is big enough and strong enough, you survive. So they're building the firewall in Georgia in the early vote. And whether or not it survives the onslaught remains to be seen. But if you didn't have that firewall, if you didn't build that vote, you know in advance you're going to lose. Right? And what we know from looking at the early vote is that there seems to be a firewall in both states. And whether it's big enough or not, we don't know yet. But at least you could say, well, it's not like it's preordained that Democrats are going to get swamped.
I guess that's the thing. I mean,
sometimes you can look at the numbers and say, oh, they're going to lose. You can't look at these numbers and say that.
All right. So now we know what we can't say for the next week.
Right. And then you can look at a place like, North Carolina, which also has early voting. And so far, overall for 2022 compared to 2018, the Democrats are down 3 points. Republicans are up 3 points. Unaffiliated Republicans are up 1 point, and unaffiliateds are up 3 points. That's not necessarily good news for Democrats. Right? You want Democrats to be up, not down, but they're down from 2018. Republicans are about even, and the unaffiliateds are up. But in North Carolina, the worry for Democrats is unaffiliateds will break Republican. We don't know that yet. Again, that election's not over. But if you're looking at the two states, you got to be feeling better about Georgia than you do about North Carolina. If that trend continues and it gets worse, then North Carolina Republicans are going to have a good night, and North Carolina Democrats are not.
Well, cheer up, North Carolina Democrats. Madison Cawthorn can't come back.
Well, that's, it's always that.
Go celebrate that with a vote.
And there are places where you could see that a red wave is developing.
Oh, no.
Florida.
Well, that's Florida. Florida's full of Florida, man.
In 2022, so far in what vote we have, Democrats 48.2 and Republicans 46.1. In 2020, for example, Democrats were leading 50-42 at this point.
I see.
Okay. And in 2018, Republicans were winning 50-44, so we're doing better than in 2018, but not as good as in 2020. And Florida wasn't exactly a great state for us.
Not in 2020.
So, you look at North Carolina and Florida and say, that's not really, we're going to, do better than you think. But again, in some of the battleground states, that's a different issue. And then the final point that, again, people aren't talking about enough, but you really can't because you don't know.
Won't stop us.
Younger voters, the youth vote.
Oh,
John Delavope, who does the Harvard Institute of Politics youth poll, points out that their polling suggests that the younger voters are 26 points in favor of Democrats, and that unlike previous years where 25% of them said they're committed to showing up, this year it's 45%.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of people, a lot of votes, and if they show up, that's kind of a secret under the radar weapon for Democrats that the regular polls are not picking up.
Well, that would be great. Well,
Will they show? You're not going to know that until
yeah,
Election
right.
Day because they don't vote early.
Free TikTok, kids. I don't know. Yeah, what do you entice them with? Pokemon Go to the polls. Don't try that one.
Right, free TikTok, fellow kids.
It's free as it is. Well, but this has vegan pizza. I don't know. Yeah, well, big mystery, but, what can I tell you, guys? You want to have rights and live in a nice country? They need you for a day.
Yeah, they do. Other states that Simon Rosenberg had mentioned, let's look at Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is interesting because they have a lot of mail voting, which takes a long time to count. That's one of the reasons why you have that red mirage.
Yeah, Amish voting.
Okay. And in 2018, of the statewide early and absentee vote report in 2018, target early models, that Democrats were 43.2% of the vote.
All right.
Okay. Compared to Republicans, 49% of the vote. That was in 2018. 2020, that's where it flipped. Democrats were 67%. And Republicans were 26.
They really
the unaffiliated,
like
it's not that much. It's only 6%, 7% unaffiliated in Pennsylvania.
All right.
Okay. So the Democrats flipped that around and won the early vote, and that's how they won Pennsylvania. 67% in 2020. This year, 73% of the vote should be Democratic. So that's percentage-wise.
I think 100% should be. But yeah, okay, that's surprising. I would have thought that it would have come back down a little bit, but I guess people got used to the mail-in voting.
Right, and to give you an idea of how things have changed, in 2018, the total number of early votes at this point was 78,000. In 2020, it was 1,179,000.
Yeah, it would be more.
And now it's 683,000, so way more than 2018. So you can't really use 2018 as a model anymore. That's why you're better off in this particular state looking at 2020.
Uh-huh.
And the volume is similar to 2020, 1.1 million versus 683,000. You know, it's way more than the 78,000 in 2018.
Well, yeah.
But the the total vote, raw vote, is obviously not as much as in 2020.
Right.
There's still plenty of vote out there, and you simply don't know who's going to show up on Election Day for Republicans. So you got to bank them now. And as people who observe the early vote, it's crazy that the Republicans rely everything on E-Day, because what happens if something goes wrong?
Bad
what
weather.
happens if there's terrible
cows
weather?
in the
What
road.
happens?
No,
you
pork
just don't
roll
know.
left.
And leaving it all for the last minute can still get you a win, but you got to pull it off.
Right.
And that's why looking at the relatively low votes from all areas of Nevada is just so interesting, because everybody else looks like they're having a high volume election, and Nevada doesn't look like that at this point. Maybe it's too early. We don't know. But if that's the case in Nevada and it's not a high volume vote, then how do you really compare?
I don't know.
Again, I'm just trying to give you an idea of why you can look at the numbers and be encouraged or not encouraged by them, but you still really can't tell until the end.
Well, they're gamblers in Nevada.
Yeah, that's true.
So they think they can read the table, but I can't.
Well, the house always wins.
Yes. So be a house.
I don't know much about gambling, but I know the house always wins. So you
Where
want to be
can
in the
I buy
house
a
if you're
house?
betting.
It is interesting.
It's a business, and they
Yeah.
make money, and that's how they do it.
How are housing prices in Nevada?
Yeah.
With all those foreclosures, you
And,
think they're coming
if
down.
you really want to go by the odds, you're better off playing blackjack than you are roulette. Roulette's for fun, but you're always going to lose.
Okay. But it's so fun. The way you lose is so excruciating.
Hey, did you know there's a difference between American and European roulette?
Hadn't thought about it. Like the swallows, I suppose.
I think American roulette adds either a 0 or a double 0, decreasing the odds even more in favor of the house.
Yes, we have
against
double
you.
zeros. They don't have that in Europe?
I think they only have 1 0.
Huh.
We
How
have
interesting.
By adding extra, slots, you make it even less likely it's going to land on yours.
Right. It's a very unique American innovation.
So
if
double
zero
casinos
is
start
still
losing
zero.
money on roulette, they're going to add a 000.
I guess so.
Make it more interesting.
Well, you know what? That would probably work with Americans. Look, a new slot. It's all new.
It's all new, and
Right.
it's really,
The European Union probably has rules
it's got
against
spangles.
that. I guess so.
glitter.
Blinking zero, and or people who are raised on Price
Special
is Right,
zero.
who think that that's a good thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that no, I had no idea. But then I play so little roulette in Europe these days.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, except if it's COVID.
Yeah. Well, what happens in Monaco? I don't know. Nothing. I guess.
I just,
Well,
figure,
where did you learn that?
The way they played roulette in Casablanca is like more my speed.
I see. Okay. Well,
Just make sure I win.
damn. Well, that's you learn something new about European gambling every day. Just like there's a new prime minister in England every day.
Yeah, we covered that
New
yesterday.
rule. Yes. Right. Well,
There's still the same one
Same
today.
guy,
I just thought
so
I would
very
mention
boring.
that to our listeners.
yes. Thank you for keeping us up to date on that. That could change at any moment. They might decide to add a 00 prime minister, like 007.
I was reading a New York Times article, and I'm seeing everywhere, all of them referring to Rishi Sunak as the Asian non-white prime minister. So
That
that
seems
discussion
like
we had
a
about
long
him being
way of saying
Asian seems to be the way it's being described everywhere.
Okay. Well, that is interesting. I'd like to look into that and see if we can figure it out before he's no longer prime minister, which could be next week for all we know. Thanks, Greg. We'll check in with you and check on the prime ministers, too. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Wow, there's a lot still left to cover, but we got a lot of things, including some new rules for how to conduct yourself in the frenzied period leading up to the election, and where to go if you want better odds in roulette as well, I guess. So lots to digest here. Let me see. What do we have in terms of other news to gather from around the country and around the world, if you've got something to add to that. This tidbit I noticed last night, it doesn't mean a great deal, but just to keep up with happenings. It appears that the January 6th committee has been blocked once more, at least temporarily, in expanding its I guess in bringing in new information and subpoenaing new documents and information from other targets in the investigation. Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan temporarily blocking the January 6th panel from accessing records of the Arizona GOP chair. The story here reported in The Hill, thanks to John Krusel, who writes that Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan on Wednesday temporarily blocked the House panel investigating the January 6th insurrection from accessing the phone records belonging to the Arizona Republican Party's chairwoman. Now, before I go on with this, I laugh because I've plugged in a new extension into my browser, which I'm sure is a tremendous security risk. It's just that I don't do anything classified and nobody cares. But an interesting plugin nonetheless. You may be interested in something like this. And I thought briefly about we could make this a feature of the show. So I saw it advertised yesterday in a pop-up ad, which means it's totally trustworthy and is absolutely not stealing my data. So that's good. The ad was on Worldometers, where I was looking at coronavirus information. Oh, and by the way, just for those of you who keep track of such things or who are interested in such things, the data that I find in these in these COVID reports, I just happened to notice that yesterday, as I was combing through the data on the number of deaths experienced in each state per million residents, the normalized rate of deaths versus, over the total number of people in the state, et cetera. So normalized for population size. That early on in the pandemic, in the first year plus of the pandemic, that New York and New Jersey in particular were among the hardest hit in the nation in terms of the number of people who died from coronavirus. And not just in raw numbers, but, by population as well. And now New York is entirely out of the top 10 states, and New Jersey about to fall off the top 10 list for the first time in the entire pandemic. And yesterday bypassed by Michigan. And if you haven't been paying attention to the COVID numbers nightly, as I report them to you, or even watching at all in the last couple of days, then you might be surprised. I mean, way back early in the pandemic, part of the reason for doing these as threads was so that you could, in fact, scroll back and take a look at how things have changed over time. But, at the moment, the states experiencing the worst rate of deaths from COVID are Mississippi, Arizona, Alabama, West Virginia, which, again, if you have haven't really, done anything but tune out the news since the beginning of the pandemic, right along when the vaccines first came out, West Virginia made headlines distributing it better than anybody and getting their elderly population vaccinated very quickly and efficiently. And then since then, I don't know, everything's gone kablooey. And of course, with red MAGA states and red MAGA politics souring everyone who believes in them on any way of mitigating COVID or even the necessity of mitigating COVID, what has happened here? Where the list used to be New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Northeast, and blue state bastions, it's now dominated by red states, Mississippi, Arizona, which sometimes sends some blue representatives to Congress, yes, but generally otherwise a very competitive state, if not just a totally red state generally. Alabama, West Virginia, I think we left off there. Arkansas, New Mexico, which is bluish. Tennessee, Michigan, which has a blue tinge to it as well. New Jersey, solidly blue for the most part. And Louisiana. So, there you go. That's a very different top 10 than you used to get. And as I said, Michigan just vaulted past New Jersey. And you don't really think of Michigan, as that hotbed of terrible COVID numbers, although, they made themselves famous in their resistance to COVID mitigation factors, up to and including, well, maybe let's kidnap the governor so we can get rid of these things. And as a result, it's slowly climbing in the ranks and is among the top 10 in total deaths per million in population. The spread among the states is still, relatively wide, but Mississippi still sitting at the top, but being threatened by Arizona. Mississippi currently 4,357 deaths per million people in the state. That is to say, out of every million people in the state, 4,357 of them will have died of COVID. Arizona, 4,334. So right on the heels of Mississippi, which has been sitting at the top of the list for a long time. Alabama, West Virginia, Arkansas, New Mexico, Tennessee. The top 7 are all 4,000 deaths per million plus. The 8th, 9th, and 10th slots are in the 3,900s, 3,930 per million in Michigan, 3,927 now in New Jersey, 3,908 in Louisiana. So again, here the trend has been upwards movement for Michigan. Louisiana has been creeping up slowly. It's going to take them some time to pass New Jersey. They don't tend to make big jumps in those numbers, but I think eventually they'll do that and New Jersey will slide off the list. If you look at the thread going way, way, way back, and it'll take you some time to scroll all the way back to when it's not, in other words, not the sort of thing you want to try to do on the air, though I am trying to do it anyway. But if you have the patience to scroll all the way back, 2 years ago in the beginning days of the pandemic, you'll find, that it was mostly northeastern states. Louisiana has been on the list for a long time. They got kind of hard hit by Mardi Gras 2020, I think, and they too have been falling in the list. So it is possible that they may never surpass New Jersey, but it's also possible that both of them will be surpassed by, I guess, the next states coming up in that list. And by the way, what are those? In case you're wanting to predict the future, we'll see how close people are to surpassing both New Jersey and Louisiana. Let's go take a quick look at Worldometers live and in person and see if we can figure that out. If we check the deaths per million, I guess the most likely candidates for surpassing both Louisiana and New Jersey, Kentucky, which has been quietly posting terrible numbers for some time now and has moved into 11th place in deaths per million. Georgia, close behind them, and even closer is the race between Georgia and Florida. Florida still threatening to leap its way back up the ranks, but I think they have been ratcheting back on their reporting of late. And I think they're hoping that lack of counting will keep them from making their way into the top 10. But probably by all rights, you should see them there fairly soon. Anyway, just sort of background reporting on COVID issues. But that wasn't what I was, the original diversion was something completely different. So on the Worldometers site, I had seen advertised, remember this story? I'd seen advertised this plugin for your browser, which I thought was a very interesting and innovative way of approaching the absorption of new language skills. Lots of apps out there that say, I'll teach you a new foreign language in your spare time. All you got to do is use our app and play our little language games every day. And there are check-ins and all these. I find them very ineffective because, you have to, even if you turn on reminders that say, remember, you're supposed to play this stupid language game today, you just say, screw it, I don't want to. It doesn't matter to me if I earn points in this app or not. Nothing happens if I earn the points anyway. So it's not really as effortless as it needs to be. Well, this I thought was interesting. So the app's name is Toucan, like the bird. And the idea is, you plug it into your browser and you choose the language that you want to learn and the level at which you need to start, whether it's beginner or you're more advanced or intermediate. And what it does is, while you're surfing the web, as kids used to say like 30 years ago when they first brought the thing out. At any rate, when you're reading articles or whatever you're reading on the web, this will gradually change the materials you're reading to the language you're looking to practice in, which is great if it's, something that you have some idea of what you're doing in, like Spanish for me. But if it's a brand new thing, especially if it uses a completely different type of lettering and alphabet, well, it's not quite as effective, I don't think. But at any rate, what it does essentially, if you turn it on for Spanish, is it will switch every 15th word. It's not quite like that, but it picks out words, scans what you're reading, and then swaps them for Spanish words. And then based on the context and the fact that at lower levels, the words that tend to change tend to be the cognates, which are pretty easy to figure out anyway. But the idea is, with some surrounding English for context, you will pick up the meaning of these Spanish words or whatever language it is that you choose without really having to look them up. You can, of course, if you're baffled by them, hover over it with your cursor and it'll give you the quick definition. and even an opportunity to have the word pronounced for you in the foreign language. But it's really interesting and a great way, I thought, to, inject a little bit of language, especially if you kind of know a language and are a little bit rusty on it. It seemed like a good way to brush up on your Spanish, except then you got to remember, if you're going to do like a radio show, to turn that feature off, because otherwise you get part of the articles that you mean to read on the air in Spanish. Then I thought, what a fun way to teach everybody Spanish, except that's not really what you're necessarily here for. But what an interesting, it adds a little bit of extra interest to reading the articles, right? Remember what I was going to read you? Justice Kagan, temporarily blocks January 6th panel from accessing records of Arizona GOP chair. John Krusel wrote it for The Hill. And according to The Hill and intermediate level Tucan, as they would say in Spanish, Supreme Corte Justice Elena Kagan. Did you say Elena or Elena? I don't know. I'll have to ask her. On Wednesday, temporalmente blocked the House panel investigating the January 6, 2021 insurrection from accessing phone records belonging to the Arizona Republican Party's chairwoman. Kagan, who handles emergency matters arising from Arizona, that is their circuit, of course, granted a request made earlier Wednesday by Kelly Ward, the GOP chairwoman, and her esposo. Good to see her esposo involved in the case. And in case you don't speak any Spanish whatsoever and weren't able to figure it out from the context, that is the word for husband in Spanish. The latest development comes after a lower appeals corte denied the Ward's bid to shield the records that congressional investigators are pursuing as part of their probe of last year's pro-Trump riot at the Capitol. Kagan ordered the House January 6th panel to respond to the Ward's application by Friday, close of business, that's tomorrow. Kagan can handle the application herself or refer the matter to the full Corte. I guess they really love doing the court one. Okay. The January 6th panel, which subpoenaed Ward's phone carrier, has expressed interest in her role as a phony pro-Trump elector following his loss in Arizona during the 2020 election. Ward and her husband, Michael Ward, were among a group of 11 Arizonans who signed a fake election certificate purporting to show, I love it, purporting to show that former President Trump won the state. Now, interestingly, they've changed every instance of the word court to corte, but not every instance of the word husband to esposo. In court papers filed Wednesday, and that one wasn't changed, the Wards portrayed the January 6th investigation as politically motivated and said their case carried profound precedential implications for the constitutional right to free political association. Yet we have a right to freely associate as fake electors? Okay. In a first-of-its-kind situation, a select committee of the United States Congress, dominated by one political party, has subpoenaed the personal telephone and text message records of a state chair of the rival political party relating to one of the most contentious political events in American history, the 2020 election and the Capitol riot of January 6, 2021. They wrote, it's an interesting thing that they framed it that way, and I'm sure they wanted to leave the riot out entirely. I'm surprised they even used the word riot in that, but that sort of gives away the game. I mean, up to that point, it does sound outrageous. A select committee of Congress dominated by one political party subpoenas the personal telephone and text message records of a state chair of the rival political party, except that rival was seeking to overthrow the United States government. And that kind of gets left out. The Wards' application to the Supreme Court comes after a divided panel on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit voted 2-1 to deny the Wards' request for an order barring their phone carrier, T-Mobile, from complying with the January 6th panel's subpoena for records spanning the run-up to the November 2020 election through January 2021. And there is just a little bit more and a little bit more Spanish for you here. Earlier in the case, a federal judge in Arizona rejected the Wards' request to quash the subpoena, prompting their appeal. The January 6th House Committee has described the multi-state attempt to put forth fake Trump electors as central to the esfuerzo to overturn Trump's defeat. The effort. Esfuerzo to overturn Trump's defeat, which eventually led to the riot at the Capitol. That's the end of the article. That's probably the end of the Spanish for today, unless you're enjoying it and you want me to keep going and either confuse you or help you brush up on your Spanish to the extent that this is possible. So remember, this is intermediate level. So if you're worried about that and you'd rather do it at a beginner level, that is fine too. And apparently you can switch that. You can even switch languages if you decide you want to learn a different one. Although, honestly, the extension wasn't working that well for me yesterday, and I had some trouble resetting it. I can turn it on and off. I just can't set it to a new level or choose a different language just yet until I read more about how this thing works. Pretty interesting. And if you're looking for the extension for yourself, it is at Join Toucan. Toucan, jointoucan.com. They're not paying me anything. In fact, they're insisting that I pay them, amazingly enough, to use this stupid app. But anyway, I thought it was a good idea. I was always looking for a way of making it effortless to brush up on things. And then my first thought was I'll start watching more Spanish language TV, or I can watch all the Netflix stuff dubbed in Spanish but with English subtitles. But you know what happens is I just end up reading the subtitles, and I feel like I don't learn as much. So I thought this might work. It's something to talk about anyway. And we'll see what else, whether it's also interesting in other contexts. So let's see. I have a couple of other stories I thought I should share with you. I should probably scroll a little bit and see whether any of the older ones really ought to be included in today's stories and roundup. Let's see. Let me try this one. I thought this was maybe a good addition to our general, in the run-up to the election, some general reading that we do about how, we're losing our democracy. I know, it's an old theme already, but I thought this might make an interesting addition. How the right wing's delusions went from not normal to dangerous. This in the Washington Post, I guess a review of, it's listed as review by Amanda Uhlie, U-H-L-E. So what book are we reviewing? I don't know. Oh, there it is. There's the graphic. Robert Draper's Weapons of Mass Delusion, When the Republican Party Lost Its Mind. And I'm a little worried about the headline, How the Right Wing's Delusions Went from Not Normal to Dangerous. I would love to know that, but I think it will probably be more about a description of that time when the right wing's delusions went from not normal to dangerous. How did it go there? As is the question of why did it happen? I don't know. How did it go from this to that? Well, it went a little something like this. I think it'll be just descriptive of what, of how crazy people became, as opposed to, well, why did that work? Which is really what we need to know. And this article, too, partly in Spanish. Try it again. The review, again, of the book by Robert Draper, Weapons of Mass Delusion, When the Republican Party Lost Its Mind. It begins this way. I heard them before I saw them. A banging, ready for some Spanish? Cacofonia. I think you can figure out what that is. A banging cacophonia of big rigs with throbbing engines. The sound as confusing to me as it was loud. I walked toward the wall of noise and saw a caravan of horn-blaring trucks roaring through mi barrio. My neighborhood. The advance team for a riotous protest against a public university's graduación keynote speaker earlier this year, Anthony S. Fauci. Again, heavy on the cognates. You can probably figure it all out. I ventured into the crowd of protesters outside El Lugar with a personal goal. Outside of the venue. They're going to use the venue. Well, the place. El Lugar. With a personal goal. To understand not only Spanish, but what would bring this aggrieved mass to our college town on a sunny spring afternoon. I had no official tarea to write a story assignment, but I elbowed deep inside the throng to ask anyone who would talk to me, what brought you here? The ear-splitting truck brakes and horns made it impossible to catch their answers, but their hand-painted poster boards were clear enough. They saw the coronavirus pandemic through an entirely different lens than I did. And now, as a result, their states are at the top of the death lists. Instead of the appreciation I felt for Fauci's leadership and medical, conocimiento, knowledge, medical conocimiento, this crowd reviled him and wanted him to be punished with jail time or death at the gallows, according to their signs, for his support for mask wearing and vaccination. Were they deluded or was I? Well, they were deluded. I mean, don't question yourself on that front. But I see where you're getting at. In his vital and indispensable Weapons of Mass Delusion, When the Republican Party Lost Its Mind, journalist Robert Draper invites readers to follow A.L. as he elbows his way, into a similar crowd with a far greater degree of power, but a similar compromiso to outlandish thinking. Those who occupy the right wing in Congress. Draper is drawn to individuos who speak and tweet opinions far outside of oh boy, this one is going to be a little more difficult. Alineación, alignment, out of alineación with realidad. How do you like that? But it's a testament to his proeza, his prowess, proeza, that he doesn't begin and end with gawking curiosity, instead treating his subjects with empathy, even in the many instances when he's disputing a matter of hecho, fact. And his rigorous reporting adds an unusual level of depth to his account of U.S. politics since January 6, 2021. The book's first section, One Day in Washington, will be consumed by most readers in a single breathless trago. Gulp is their own translation of it. Sometimes these words have alternate translations as well. And I'm wondering how accurate it is. And maybe Spanish speakers will recognize it as pretty good or ridiculous and let us know. For an event as widely reported as the insurrection at the Capitol has been, Draper provides a startling level of new first-person detail. We've watched the hearings. We've all read El Periódico accounts of that fateful day, not the one newspaper actually called El Periódico, but newspapers in general, of course. But Draper's extensive interviews with 150 sources pierce the staid hechos, facts, with vivid humanity. After Speaker pro tempore Jim McGovern of Massachusetts declared the House in recess at the insistence of El Capitolio police, he looked at his phone and saw that his 19-year-old hija, daughter, had written, "You should leave." Representative Peter Meyer of Michigan received very different texts. After a terrifying evacuation past the scene where Ashley Babbitt had been shot, the brand new to Washington legislator looked at his phone and found angry messages from constituents. One warned, "You better not buckle and wimp out to the liberals. Don't sell us out." Though the 34 chapters that follow are still briskly told, the momentum changes as Draper continues to plumb the evolving motivations and perspectives of members of Congress during one of the most challenging episodes in the institution's historia. Wisely, Draper forgoes the temptation, to dig deeply into QAnon, right-wing radio, or even Donald Trump himself, keeping a tight lens on Congress. Draper posits that the 18-month period covered in his book represents the pivot point between this is not normal and this is dangerous and not going away. The Republican Party plunged deeper into a Trumpian cult of compulsive dissembling and conspiracy mongering, he writes. It fell hostage to the party's most fevered extremists, and the usual partisan differences gave way to an existential call to arms. Those of us who assumed that Trump's return to private citizenry would reestablish normalcy didn't anticipate the scope of la desinformación. I think you all can figure out what that might be, and its capacity to delude so many. As Draper shows, figures such as Representative, we know her as Murdery Trader Green, and Representante Paul A. Gosar have carried forward the bombastic, untruthful messages Trump propagated during his term, but the author doesn't treat Trump as un títere master. That's interesting. Puppet master. Instead, oh my goodness, this is nonsense. I can't continue with the Spanish, but we'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Anyway, you can flip the switch on Toucan. There's a little icon that you can click and turn off the Spanish translations or whatever language you've chosen, and seems to be getting in the way not only of reading but comprehending. Reading it aloud to everyone else it's a different game. Reading it to yourself much more helpful. But at any rate, I kind of enjoy them throwing a little bit of additional Spanish in there. I might have to up the number and go to the advanced Spanish because, a bunch of cognates is not much help to me, although it is good to brush up on exactly how they're spelled when you see them. But you aren't getting that. So at any rate, let's see, we left off by saying those of us who assumed that Trump's return to private citizenry would reestablish normalcy didn't anticipate the scope of the misinformation and its capacity to delude so many. As Draper shows, figures like Murdery Trader Green and Paul Gosar have carried forward the bombastic, untruthful messages Trump propagated during his term. But the author doesn't treat Trump as a puppet master. Instead, he carefully reveals the incentives that might inspire each of these public figures. The obvious answers, money, or a desire to be reelected or ascend to a higher position, are only part of the nuanced portrait he paints. Former dentist Gosar, who Draper writes was thought of by fellow House Republicans as odd and occasionally offensive, is portrayed as gaining respectability in the wake of the 2020 election. And at a November 2020 rally outside a Phoenix recorder's office, Gosar proudly shouted into a megaphone, "Patriots! They're not going to steal this election from us, are they?" In the chapter titled The Enabler, Draper describes Representative Kevin McCarthy as slick and supple-minded. That's unusual. Oozing with the ambition that leads him in illogically destructive circles around his hero, Trump. McCarthy was one of 139 House Republicans who voted to object to the election results, even as he admitted that his own life was in danger from crazed election deniers. He gingerly danced around cable news questions about Trump's culpability in the aftermath before stopping by Mar-a-Lago on January 28, 2021 for a photo op with a grinning Trump whose blessing McCarthy sought above all else. Weapons of Mass Delusion takes place mostly in 2021, but its research stretches as far back as Green's obsession with CrossFit in 2011, which jeopardized her marriage, and McCarthy's high school biology classroom in the early 1980s, where the future representative spoke highly of Trump, then a real estate developer. Okay. He talked about him all the time, a high school friend of McCarthy's is quoted as recalling. That is unusual. The big lie that the 2020 presidential election was illegitimate is the central delusion in the book. but it's part of the tapestry of deceit, from coronavirus misinformation to smaller things, like McCarthy stretching the truth about starting a sandwich shop when he was in his teens. Draper adds color and detail to the myriad ways in which these lies are told. Gosar, for instance, was careful not to make an outright statement about the results of the 2020 election, but kept up a months-long campaign to not so subtly refer to the elected president as Mr. Biden, a suggestion that he didn't hold rights to that office. The abundance of deceptions is compelling and adds heft to the author's ultimate point that Americans' combative relationship with the truth has made us vulnerable to any outrageous lie. Draper's diligent reporting occasionally takes us outside the halls of Congress, introducing us to people who say the Capitol riot was carried out by Antifa leftists donning MAGA gear, or who conveniently believe that electoral malfeasance was present in 2020 but not in 2016. Most fascinating is his reporting on individuals like Guy Reffitt, the first January 6th insurrectionist convicted at trial. Reffitt was a member of the This Is Texas Freedom Force, who wore tactical gear and brought firearms and plastic wrist restraints to Washington. Draper writes that 5 days after January 6th, Reffitt told his 18-year-old son and 16-year-old daughter that he needed to delete the contents of his helmet camera. Warning them not to tell anyone, the two children would recall to the FBI that their father said to them to choose a side or die, and traitors get shot. Even amid the book's many revelations, these passages are stark and disquieting. And you know what's interesting? It turns out that the traitors don't get shot after all, because, I mean, he's convicted. He's the traitor in this, but what did he get, a couple of months? And nothing's going to happen. So, of course, that means that he'll be running around the rest of his life still convinced that traitors do get shot. It's just that they haven't been shot yet, and the traitors are everybody else, because if it was really him, he would have been shot, you see. Anyway, it's not a bad idea. At the protest against Fauci's undergraduate commencement remarks, I started to wonder what I was doing in a crowd of protesters holding "Lock Him Up" signs. When truth is this pliable, what could they tell me that I would believe? And this deep into the era of Trump, what can someone like me discover beyond overused MAGA stereotypes? A woman held a red sign with a Bible verse, her hair in two braids that grazed her hips. Men wore long white beards, red hats, like Santa. I approached an outlier, a trim guy in a fleece zip-up. Look out for the fleece guys, though. Sipping on a green smoothie in a mason jar. What brought him here? He reported that he cared deeply about health and safety, and the only way he could see to drive that point home was to protest the vaccine and the public health policies that, as science has proved, saved millions of lives. No one, including Draper, has a solution for the funhouse of warped truths we're all navigating now. Absent a resolution to this calamitous state of affairs, we have an urgent mandate to shine a light on these horrifying lies, to document them with fairness and authenticity, to elbow our way into the morass, demand to know how we arrived at this dark place. I was wondering about that. And, crucially, listen deeply to what we hear. I don't know. Fighting falsehood is all that matters if democracy is to survive, and Draper comes with the fiercest weapon yet, the truth. Well, okay, I don't know. I was hoping to learn a little bit more from out of this, but I think, as I mentioned, it was pretty clear that I was afraid we weren't going to ever really find out the how of the right wing's delusions moving from not normal to dangerous, but the fact that they have has been documented once again, and with a slightly different focus, and an important one, inside Congress. So that book out there now, we'll see whether it makes the rounds. If Twitter survives, whether we'll all start talking about excerpts from Draper's book in the coming days. All right, let's see other things that I can share, almost, I guess in this case, entirely in English. This piece of news took me a little bit by surprise, but it starts to make some sense. And then the arguments make even more sense than you might otherwise have thought. Arnold Schwarzenegger chiming in yesterday, noting that he had filed an amicus brief in Moore versus Harper, That is the case coming before the Supreme Court that will, in which the Republicans are attempting to bolster and make a real thing out of the so-called independent state legislature theory. So, a dangerous case, to be sure. Interesting that Arnold Schwarzenegger would choose to weigh in on this, and interesting to hear what he has to say. He says, you've got to be polite at SCOTUS, but here are my unfiltered thoughts. Frankly, this theory is nuts. And he gives a little tweet thread about those unfiltered thoughts. And then he supplies a link as well to his filtered thoughts in a link to the actual amicus brief, which I don't know how long it is. It might actually be worth reading, although it's 36 pages. So we can't make our way through all of it, but you might be interested in doing it. And you might even be interested in reading it in Arnold Schwarzenegger's voice to yourself, if you feel like it. Or you could, of course, come here and we'll do it, but we'll start with just the tweet thread because it's easier to get through. First, of course, the way he says first, legislators draw district lines to lock in legislative incumbents so the people have no recourse at the ballot box. And then they tell us that only the state legislature, this is very difficult to do in these lines. I mean, I'll be back and hasta la vista, baby, is a lot easier to do than legislators drawing district lines to lock in legislative incumbents. And it does a disservice to the argument because it's really pretty solid. And also very interesting is his, the first couple pages of the brief explaining why am I here? Why am I giving an amicus brief? Also very solid. He's done some real work on this, and he could have sat this out for sure. But first, which I always love to say in his voice, first, legislators draw district lines to lock in legislative incumbents so the people have no recourse at the ballot box. And then they tell us that only the state legislature, which they have now made certain the people can't throw out in fair elections, can change the law. They should be asked to take the same citizenship test that I took in 1983, Arnold says, so that they can be reminded of the separation of powers and checks and balances that stand as the foundation of our fantastic country. James Madison said, you must first enable government to control the governed, and in the next place, second, I was saying, but in the next place, oblige it to control itself. These legislators want an uncontrollable government, and the court shouldn't give it to them. That's it. That's the tweet thread. As far as the petition or the amicus brief itself, it begins this way in explaining things. Well, first I got to get through the table of authorities. He's done a good job here, and I'm sure he's had some help in drafting this thing and putting it into the correct brief format. The argument doesn't begin until page 11, so that's a good chunk of it off, 1/3 less than we thought we'd have to read through. But here, expressing in the opening argument the interest of amicus curiae, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger served as the governor of California, as you know, from 2003 to 2011. In 2012, he helped found the Schwarzenegger Institute for State and Global Policy at the Saul Price School of Public Policy at the University of Southern California. Okay, great. Governor Schwarzenegger experienced firsthand the pernicious effects of partisan gerrymanders, from never-ending redistricting disputes to the partisan political atmosphere that results from gerrymanders. He also has had first-hand experience with state government reforms that can eliminate or at least minimize partisan gerrymanders. In 2008 and 2010, Governor Schwarzenegger successfully advocated for 2 ballot initiatives discussed, infra, that established a nonpartisan redistricting commission for California's legislature, Board of Equalization, and U.S. House members. These reforms ended decades of partisan gerrymanders, and you may or may not agree with that, to the benefit of California's citizens and political system. Governor Schwarzenegger retains a continuing interest in the survival and success of these reforms. I mean, it's a generalized interest in the survival of democracy, yes, but with some specifics that actually, make some sense of his showing up unbidden as an amicus for this, with this brief. So, real interesting. We won't be able to get into the particulars of his argument on the air, but I recommend it to you. It's certainly worth reading, and Arnold has really kind of evolved into, a real departure from the celebrity candidate who runs for office just because he can and ends up doing nothing but bolstering his own brand. I mean, he actually grew and changed in the job. And there were people who at one point believed that that was going to happen to Donald Trump too, but he just didn't. This is a great illustration of the difference in mental capacity between the two. So anyway, I thought that was of some interest, and you might want to read a bit about that. Also, let's see, why not add this piece from Bolts Mag? Bolts Magazine has an interesting story from Paul McLeod, who writes about activity in New Mexico. In particular, a New Mexico county went to war with voting machines and, lost pretty badly, but it may yet gain a powerful ally in November. Another slightly different angle in retelling the same story of, yes, the election deniers are standing for election and will make policy and will have the ability to lend the imprimatur of state to crazy conspiracy theories and or just whoever they want to win elections, whether they got the most votes or not. And well worth examining. And to do it from the Bolts Magazine perspective in general, I think adds something to hearing it again, and again from publications of more generalized interest. So again, a New Mexico county went to war with voting machines. It may gain a powerful ally in November. Subheader, conspiracy theorists are pushing to upend New Mexico's voting systems. State officials have stood up to them, but the Secretary of State race could change the balance of power. Be interesting to see whether this drives the point home more powerfully than other write-ups of the same topic. The lawyer was clear. What the commissioners of Otero County, New Mexico, were thinking of doing this fall was against the law. If they followed through, they could be removed from office and could face criminal charges. And it really did happen there, too. But Commissioner Couy Griffin was adamant, and that's the name you know because he was eventually removed. As the founder of Cowboys for Trump, which nobody needed, he was steeped in election conspiracy theories that sprung up after Trump's loss in 2020. At an August 11th meeting, Griffin pushed for their county to eliminate election ballot drop boxes and voting machines, which he argued could be tools for voter fraud. He also wanted to sue Democratic Secretary of State Maggie Toulouse Oliver, who months earlier had gone to court to force them to certify primary election results that Griffin didn't trust. The other two commissioners, also Republicans, weren't buying it. As their county lawyer, R.B. Nichols, made clear, the use of voting machines and drop boxes is dictated by state law. It won't matter what we vote. We have no authority to do anything, said Gerald Matherly. Fellow Commissioner Vicky Marquardt agreed, saying, this is out of our purview. Hours later, after a raucous community meeting that included shouting, allegations of fraud, and calls for resignations, Griffin prevailed. The commission voted 2-1 to do away with drop boxes and voting machines, as well as to sue the Secretary of State. These moves kicked off an intra-party showdown between Republican elected officials following the rule of law and others who are trying to overturn the system as they pursue election conspiracies in a county that voted 62% for Trump in 2020. They offer a preview for the types of fights that could ensue as more election deniers seek positions of electoral power in New Mexico, and elsewhere, of course. So far, those on the side of following the law are winning, but that is only true as long as key positions are filled by people willing to resist pressure from constituents who have bought into Trump's big lie conspiracies. Otero County Clerk Robin Holmes, also a Republican, is refusing to comply with the commission's directive. Holmes says she has the power to decide how local elections are run, and the voting machines and drop boxes will stay. They cannot create laws. I took an oath of office to follow the law, and that's what I'm going to do, Holmes told Bolts. Holmes has the benefit of knowing that in her showdown with the commission, she has Toulouse Oliver backing her up. Back in June, the Otero Commission refused to certify primary election results, despite one commissioner, Matherly, being on the ballot and needing his own candidacy to be certified. The commission had no discretion to refuse to certify results under state law, and Toulouse Oliver went to court to force the commission to reverse course. The state Supreme Court stepped in and sided with her. Asked if having an election denier as Secretary of State would change the dynamic and make her job more difficult, Holmes said, "I think absolutely it would." New Mexico is one of several states this fall where an election denier is vying to take over the Secretary of State position. The Republican challenger to Toulouse Oliver is Audrey Trujillo, a pro-Trump candidate who rejected the results of the 2020 presidential election and called Biden's victory a coup. Trujillo has endorsed various conspiracy theories and claimed that school shootings were conducted by the deep state in order to push an agenda to take away guns. She is campaigning heavily on conspiracies about election security, saying that current New Mexico leaders weaponized voter laws and the COVID-19 pandemic to secure their elections for at least 100 years. She's like particularly off the wall, I guess. Similar to the movement in Otero County, she claims voting machines manipulated election results and has called for hand-counting ballots. In June, Trujillo publicly urged the state's county commissioners to not certify their primary election results without a hand recount and encouraged them to stop using voting machines from Dominion voting systems. "I just want to improve the system we have in place. I'm not here to recreate the wheel," Trujillo told the Las Cruces Sun News in September. "But if there are questions on those machines," and then to date there really aren't, none that have survived the courts anyway, "we're going to do our damnedest to do our research and see how we can do it in a better way and an easier way." A Secretary of State sympathetic to conspiracy theorists could embolden controversies that are already bubbling at the local level, either by sitting back and doing nothing when local officials refuse to certify results, or, more dramatically, themselves refusing to certify the lists of candidates running for state office. They could also disrupt other key roles that the office plays in overseeing elections, with responsibilities ranging from producing election rules to investigating complaints of lawbreaking. New Mexicans are also voting on 2 Supreme Court elections this year. The High Court is sure to remain in Democratic hands, but Republicans could narrow their deficit, and at least one of the GOP candidates has echoed conspiracies about election administration. County commission meetings across the state are regularly beset by residents expressing unfounded conspiracy theories about how drop boxes and voting machines are tied to election fraud. Occasionally, commissioners take their side. "It's the overall system that comes into question," one exasperated county commissioner told the AP. "So how do you challenge that? How do you get your answers?" The source of many of these theories is a husband and wife couple, David and Erin Clements, who have traveled all across the country to evangelize their brand of election denialism. They happen to be from New Mexico, one county over from Otero. In their home state, they have dubbed themselves the New Mexico Audit Force and released an extensive report full of voter fraud allegations that fall apart under scrutiny. Neither have a background in elections. Erin Clements was a civil engineer. David Clements was a business professor at New Mexico State University who was fired after refusing to comply with the school's COVID safety policies on masking or vaccinations. He amassed a large following online and raised over $300,000 from a crowdfunding campaign. The couple travels from state to state, urging people to show up at their local government meetings to demand voting machines and drop boxes be removed. They have been particularly active in New Mexico, and it's working. County clerks have been receiving steady pressure to dismantle the machinery of elections. It's consistent, it is unrelenting, it is sometimes aggressive. I've had to report a couple of threats to the FBI, said Doña Ana County Clerk Amanda Lopez Askin. I hate to say it, but it's part of the job at this point, sadly. She counted 141 Freedom of Information Act requests from election deniers, including requests for in-person tours to audit election machinery. They have really weaponized public records requests. If I let them, they would incapacitate my office to the point where we would not be able to run an election, said Lopez Askin. In Otero County, this dynamic exploded into a chaotic community meeting the evening of August 11th. The Clemenses were welcomed on stage to discuss their report. When County Attorney R.B. Nichols reiterated that the commission had no legal authority to do away with voting machines or ballot drop boxes, David Clements lambasted the local officials for cowardice. It's tyranny, and you don't help them, you don't help us, you don't fight, you just do whatever the Secretary of State tells you to, he said. Supporters in the public gallery cheered along. Nichols was insistent, saying he would not go along with the Clemenses' demands that the county sue the Secretary of State. I'm not going to file a frivolous lawsuit, David. I have to have a good faith basis. When an audience member called for following the law, Clements said that Nazis under the direction of Hitler were also following the law. When Commissioner Matherly discussed downgrading the motion to a request so that they would not risk going to jail, Clements shamed him. And why are you scared of going to jail? The Clemenses, along with Commissioner Griffin, waged a steady pressure campaign. Griffin argued that the commission should sue Toulouse Oliver for forcing them to certify primary results that he claimed were later proven to be fraudulent. The basis of Griffin's fraud claim is that a hand recount changed the results of one primary race by 3 votes. Clerk Holmes explained that 3 people filled out their ballot incorrectly and that the machine would have notified them of their mistake and directed them to get a new ballot. But sometimes people do not want to start over and submit it anyway. She said during the hand recount, election workers determined that voter intention of those 3 ballots were clear enough to be counted. Despite this explanation, Griffin continued to insist that the discrepancy was proof of voter fraud. If there were 3 votes that weren't counted in that race, how many other races were the same? He said. And how does that affect the big picture, okay? Again, I'm just fighting for the truth up here, and I see it pretty clearly right now. So that's an interesting angle to take on things. Like, well, this one got it wrong by 3 votes. And if you had done the votes correctly, or the way the machine wanted to, the outcome of the election would have changed not at all. But instead, they filled out their ballots incorrectly. The machine spat it back out. They were given an opportunity to fill out a new ballot. They declined. And the election worker said, well, it's pretty clear who they were voting for this office, pretty clear who they were voting for this office. This one might not be so clear, so we can't count that one. And this is pretty clear, so we'll count that. Like how a normal person would do it. There was actually a hand inspection of the ballots that determined what to do, which is what they're demanding, that things be processed by hands. And then when they are processed by hand, they say, aha, see? Fraud, or maybe fraud, actually not fraud, but it could be fraud somewhere else. See, I have a clear grasp of the truth up here. That's what you're dealing with. David Clements, then jumped up to a microphone to shout down Holmes. You need to resign, he said. Disgusting how you fight the people, even though it had no basis in reality. Griffin and the Clemenses won the day, convincing Commissioner Marquardt to vote for removing drop boxes and voting machines, as well as for suing the Secretary of State. Returning to hand-counting ballots would turn the clock back decades of advances in voting infrastructure. In modern times, hand-counting is generally only performed in small jurisdictions dealing with a few hundred votes. In Otero County, which has 67,000 people, not even that many, but it's still a lot, a full hand count would be enormously time-consuming and could delay election results by weeks, which, of course, these guys would then jump on and say, why the delay? It's because you're trying to fake the results, isn't it? We've caught you red-handed. But that's where we would be. It would take months to settle the elections everywhere across the country. And they would use that as evidence that fraud was happening. While many people see voting machines as mysterious and consider hand-counting ballots to be the gold standard, research has consistently shown that machines are more accurate than people. One 2012 study on post-election audits published in the Election Law Journal found that when humans hand-count complex paper ballots, they can easily count ballots multiple times, skip over ballots, or misread a voter's intent. Hand-counting indisputably takes more time, more money, and is less accurate, said Victoria Bassetti, senior advisor to the state's United Democracy Center. America's fervor for democracy has created a democratic system not suited to be tallied by humans. Ballots in other developed nations may feature a single question. American ballots can run multiple pages as people vote on governors, secretaries of state, judges, sheriffs, comptrollers, and so on. That leads to a lot of tedious counting, a lot of concentration required, and a lot of opportunities for slip-ups. Reading ballots is a repetitive and boring task, and humans lose focus. They just do, said Bassetti. Well, there's an awful lot more to this article. We won't get to it, obviously, today, because now it's time to get to what
From
Justice Putnam has to say.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
And here's an idea of what's going on. Reaction to the Pennsylvania Senate debate between Fetterman and Oz ignores the history of illness and disability in the Senate and White House. Good backgrounder coming up, I'm sure. Plus, Texas Republican Chip Roy attacked the Biden administration over a program to stop COVID vaccine lies. All that and more next. Stay tuned.